Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sara Manderscheid, and I'm here today with Dr. Christina Piron, and we are going to have an incredible conversation today all about returning to running post pregnancy, postpartum, and how to get back to running safely. And I'm pretty sure we're going to also be talking about that pregnancy time where maybe you're going into your running, your training, you find out you're pregnant. What do you do? We're going to cover everything in between. And I think we're going to have a really great conversation. Hi, Christina. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited that you're here as well. I think we're gonna have a
It's gonna
great
be fun.
convo. Yeah, like I was
hmm
saying, we were chatting before we hit the record button. So this is our first like true episode on running while pregnant, that postpartum running with a doctor to kind of have a great conversation on do's and don'ts, best practices, things that are normal, things that aren't normal, just to kind of give insight into what you, the audience, may be feeling if you're in this stage in life. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited to bring these types of episodes to the podcast as well. But before we get started, because we have a guest, we're going to dive into an elevated moment series. So, Christina, do you have an elevated moment that you'd like to share?
Yeah. And thinking about it, I realized earlier this week I was on my own with my two young kids, ages 2 and 5, because my husband had an event. And I managed dinner, bath, and bedtime solo. And the kids it was very peaceful, very smooth. They got in bed and stayed in bed, which, if you have young kids out there, is not always what happens. So that's my win of the week.
Yeah, it's like dinner, check. Bath, check. Bedroom or bedtime, check. Then they stayed in bed, check,
Yeah.
check.
hmm
Did you get to have some time to yourself then, or did you just crash and go straight to bed?
No, I did. I had a little bit of like zone out time on the couch with my dog Zuzu. He's the sweetest dog ever. Before
Oh,
went to bed.
yeah, that's great. I love that. Then you got a little self-care time, and it's a
Yeah.
huge win. I love
hmm
that. Awesome. And it lends itself really well to to this week's episode. Um, my elevated moment is when this episode airs, I'll be in the mountains taking a few days away. So it's like literally and figuratively an elevated moment. I'm really excited to just have a long weekend away with my dog, Kenzie, and being able to just be surrounded by beautiful Colorado and everything that the mountain town has to offer. It's always just a fun experience to kind of take a step back, leave the phone, maybe turn the phone off, maybe you don't even have cell service, and really embrace that mountain life, which is slow. It can be really relaxing. Um, so that's my elevated moment. It's a future elevated moment, I guess, as we record. But if you're listening to this, obviously in real time, that's what I'm doing currently, which I know is going to be a great time. So, um, and that's like, I think, a really good manifestation thing too, to just kind of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
So
fantastic.
I know, right? Well, I'd love to get into this week's episode and kind of dive into um, pregnancy running, running while pregnant, and then also that postpartum running and all the things to expect. But before we dive in, I'd love to know, who is Christina?
So, I am a board certified pediatrician. I'm also a runner and a mom of, like I said, two young kids, ages 2 and 5. And I did have personal experience on this topic, getting pregnant, trying to figure out how I was going to run through it. What did that feel like? And then also trying to return, because I also happened to be signed up for a marathon for both postpartum states. So I ran a marathon after each, two very different experiences. Um, so yeah, this is a topic very important, I think, and very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, this is like your entire world. Maybe not your entire world, but I bet it's a big part of your
But
world.
yeah, I'm very passionate.
That's awesome. And how long have you been a runner?
So I was thinking about this. I can't believe it. It's been about 15 years since I started running. It started just as a way to relieve stress, and it seemed fair, like it could be cheap because I was a med student and I had a crazy schedule, and it could be done on a crazy schedule. And I just kind of stuck with it, and have gotten more into it over the years.
That's great. And you had signed up for a marathon before you found out you were pregnant with both of your children. Is that right?
It was while I was pregnant, so I
Oh,
should know
okay.
better potentially, especially the second time around. But no, yeah, I was pregnant with my first, and a good friend of mine had asked me to run a marathon with her, and I would have been. I knew I was going to be postpartum at the time, and so to support her and as a way to kind of help myself get back into things, and I went ahead and signed up. And then that same friend asked me to run a marathon again after the second one, and so I signed up again.
Can you and I know we haven't gotten into the topic for today or asked any questions around it, but I'd love to know, like, could you kind of compare like the two like postpartum return to running situations,
Yeah.
and kind of what worked and what didn't work?
Yep. So for the first one, I decided to work with a running coach, and I kind of made that decision even before it was time to start training. So it's kind of all mapped out. She helped me kind of ease back into things before I was even really like running or training. She kind of helped do some exercises and guide me there, which I think was really, really helpful. It was a wonderful weekend, a wonderful race. I felt really strong. I felt really good. And then come to baby number two, I wasn't quite as organized in my training. I did not use the coach. I probably should have. So I kind of was, making my own map, my own training schedule, and to be honest, didn't quite keep up with things the way I should have. So I wasn't quite as prepared. So I still finished. It was still fun and experience. I'm glad I got to do. But yes, I felt very, very different afterwards and during that race compared to the first one.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And we're going to talk about postpartum running here in the second half of the episode. And we're going to talk about what women can do when after they have a baby, but before they start running to set
Yeah.
themselves up for success. So I absolutely love that you have like firsthand experience as well.
Thank
And
you.
like a great example of like it worked and it didn't work. And when I didn't do it, it didn't work. So I really like that and kind of having like the two polar opposite sort of builds and build backs. But let's go back in time to about 9, 10 months before um you have a baby. So when a woman finds out that she is pregnant, what is something that she should immediately do if she's running, training for a race? Is there anything that she needs to do?
I think it's really more just like your mental mindset because initially most women are not going to alter their training schedule too much in the very beginning, especially if they find out they're pregnant very early on. But you do kind of want to start to mentally prepare and know like I'm probably slow down. I may not even be able to run to the end of my pregnancy, because everybody is different. You might not feel comfortable running to the very end, and that's okay. So I think just starting to accept, like, okay, maybe my priorities have shifted. It's not about like a PR or training for that right now, but it's definitely okay to continue as long as you're comfortable. And then, of course, checking, make sure you have your doctor's appointment set up. Make sure you're going and doing all those things as well if you're not already set up with them, just to make sure that you do have, a healthy pregnancy as much as you can. But yeah, the mental part, I think, in the beginning is one of the big things, that frame shift. And then don't start something new, I guess, is another common thing I tell women. Like if you were not already training for something like at an intense level, now is not the time to start that new journey. Kind of maintain where you're at.
Oh, yeah, like, you don't need to start 5K track workouts during
Right.
this
Just
period
like
of time.
all of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what if a female is training hard? Maybe she's training for a marathon or
Yeah.
she's training for like, a 5K, so her track workouts are really intense. What would you suggest? Should there be any modifications to the training plan, or is it really just take it week by week, day by day?
It really is week by week and day by day, and being really honest with yourself and your body. Now is not the time to kind of push those limits or those boundaries. Like, when you don't want to be overstressed, but you can still train as long as you're comfortable, you're feeling good, you're feeling strong, you're not having pain. You kind of just day by day see how it goes. There are some women who complete marathons while they are pregnant. So, it can be done and it can be safely
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like so cool that in this situation, it's listening to your body, what's working, what's not working. And the same is true when we're running and not pregnant and we're running and training. Like, listen to yourself, listen to your
done.
body, what's working, what's not. So I absolutely love that. And maybe it's a bit more like fine-tuned in this sense of like you are caring for another life at this point, and maybe it's being a bit more conservative if there is something that's popping up that feels maybe a little bit different than pre-pregnancy.
Right. And try not to compare yourself to other pregnant runners, or
Mhm.
even prior pregnant running self, because every pregnancy is different and every woman is different. And there are a lot of factors that go into like how long you might be comfortable doing certain intensity levels. So just because there are women out there who complete marathons while pregnant does not mean that you necessarily need to be or should be that woman.
Absolutely, especially if it doesn't feel good, if there is a lot of
Mhm.
discomfort. Um, Absolutely, and I think that also reigns true again for, like, all of us out
Yes.
there. It's, like, so easy to fall into that comparison trap and really, like, taking a step back and really just giving yourself grace, doing the best that you can do each day, and knowing as long as you're consistently showing up in the way that you can in this season, that gains will be made, and it's probably going to be made more so after you have the baby and all the strength you're going to have
Yeah.
um, in the return to running phase, which is really cool too. Um, are there any red flags that women should look out for when they are maybe out for a training run? Um, Anything that pops up?
Yeah, anything that's causing like significant pain, like a little bit of discomfort sometimes, sure. But if you're really having like strong pain, you need to slow down or stop. Anything if you're feeling, especially later on, like you're having contractions because of the activity you're doing, and it is not time to be having those contractions, then you should slow down, drink some water, take a break, consider kind of modifying your future workouts. Um, or obviously anything extra, if you're feeling very dizzy, lightheaded, chest pains, anything. Again, even non-pregnant would say you probably should slow down and take a break if you're feeling those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that can be really scary too to feel that way
Mhm.
out on a run, especially if you're a few miles away from home or a few miles away from your car. Um, should pregnant women carry more hydration and more fuel and gels with them if they're out for a 60-minute run or a 90-minute run, or
Yeah,
maybe they are going for like the gold and they're like training for a
yeah,
marathon? Should they be carrying more with them?
absolutely. You should expect that you are going to need, more fuel, more hydration than maybe your pre-pregnant self. So try to be prepared. And for sure, if you tend not to run with like a cell phone or something to call for help, you do want to carry something with you just in case you don't want to be kind of stuck out there somewhere with no way to contact somebody to come help you. Um, but yeah, you are going to need more fuel, more water, for sure. And you might end up needing to walk more than you used to.
Mm, yeah. Incorporating run walk intervals. And this is the part that
Mm-hmm.
is listening to your body, right? And like listening to what's working, what's not working, and adjusting and being okay adjusting. Um, no one needs to be a hero any day, let alone if you
Right.
are pregnant. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you can still, the win I think is like getting out for movement, right? Whether that's a walk,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
yeah, whether it's
Because
a
walking
walk.
is so important. Running is great if you can do it, but just like getting yourself out there is so good for your pregnancy, um, for your, baby, for your mental health. So try to focus more on that component than the pace that you're going.
Absolutely, because I think, as well as you go through the pregnancy journey and you're getting closer and closer to giving birth, those paces are going to gradually and gradually get slower, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and that's part of the process. And I think that's a really important piece to know going into it, that if you are running 10-minute miles right now, it's not going to be 10-minute miles in 6 or 7 months.
Right. And that's okay. And try to remember, like, your body is doing such an amazing feat growing that baby, supporting that baby. And then as you grow in your pregnancy, the baby itself is taking up more space. So, like, your lungs aren't able to expand like they were pre pregnancy. Things are getting pushed in places that they aren't usually pushed at, which can cause some discomfort. And just the weight of the baby in your abdomen, a lot of women, one of the reasons I personally had to stop running kind of midway through my pregnancies was just like that lower abdominal pressure from the way the baby sat was too much and too uncomfortable. Um, so like you'll feel all these things, and so it certainly can be frustrating because you kind of have this sense of I want to be able to do everything I could before, but you're not a failure because you're not able to do it. Your body is just going through, a lot of changes, and we need to give ourselves some grace with that.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it into perspective of being able to go out, do what you can, and that big, big dose of grace that I think is really hard to give ourselves in certain moments, anytime. Is there
Absolutely.
is there anything that you could add to your training or add to your routine when you're pregnant to kind of help and elevate the experience?
Yeah. So I would say one thing I often recommend is if you're not already doing like some core kind of strength training, you do want to start to incorporate that. Obviously, we all know if you're a runner, you probably should be doing like strength training. And if you're like me, you're guilty of not always doing it like you should. But it can actually really help your pregnancy. It can help you stay active longer through your pregnancy. It can help with a smoother delivery, and it can help with recovery. So starting to really focus in on that, like pelvic floor and core strength as part of your regular routine throughout the week is really
That's a great recommendation. A strong core makes for a strong runner, hands down. Strength training is so important. It's a topic we talk about on this episode
helpful.
frequently.
And
It's something that, yeah, that like can be added in small doses too. I think
yes,
the hurdle I hear a lot of athletes, no matter, where you are in life, it's all about time, right? And I think if you can really try and dedicate, maybe it's 3 days a week, 20 minutes a time, and that's how you get it done, that's how you get it done versus like overcomplicating it and thinking it has to be 60, 75,
yeah,
90 minutes in the gym. Like it can be in these micro doses that still
yeah,
give you the same impact.
absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't need to be super extensive. It just needs, I think, consistency for sure really helps. And like some of this stuff, you just need like, you just kind of, you could do it while watching TV if you want to, if you need to distracted, you can kind of incorporate these little nuggets of time to working on your core. Some women will work with like a pelvic floor physical therapist,
Mhm.
even pre-delivery, and they can kind of help them work on strengthening their pelvic floor and their core.
Yeah, that's incredible. Is there any like one core exercise you would recommend the most?
Kegels get thrown around there a lot as something you should do. But I think
Yeah.
really practicing like the deep breathing exercises can be really helpful to engage those deep abdominal muscles. And especially while pregnant too. One, it can help you focus and practice that breathing that you potentially will use during labor. But also it can help with most women when they're pregnant will have something called diastasis recti, where like the abdominal wall like shifts open like that. So it can help with that, like minimize that, and then help you recover if you continue those exercises after. So it's really simple, but really that I think those deep breathing exercises actually are really important.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's like such I think I haven't been pregnant. I don't have kids, but I'm putting myself in this situation and I'm thinking, wow, if the breathing exercises are going to check a box in maybe like three different areas, like
Right.
I'm going to do that. Like I'm going to get the most bang for my buck, so to speak, doing that. Which is kind of how I approach strength training too, or just like what's going to be like the most beneficial in the least amount of time to get through this. Um so we talked about breathing exercises, we talked about core work, strength training, but is there anything else that women can do during their pregnancy for like a quote unquote easier return to running?
I mean, honestly, try to eat healthy. Like you don't. This is not a time to be like restrictive. You're not like on a diet. But you also don't want to just eat junk. Like you want to eat real food, have a healthy diet, stay hydrated. And now's the time and pamper yourself a little bit. Like if you need that, if you can, you're able to, you need a nap, take a nap. You know, rest your body when you can, because it's that balance between we do want to stay active because that is important for a healthy pregnancy, but you don't want to go too far either. You need to let yourself rest and give yourself that time and space to do so.
Yeah, having that balance, right? It's all about the
Mhm.
balance. Yeah. Um I want to dip back into training just really quickly. Should the majority of the training runs be in zone 1, low zone 2? Um Obviously, we talked about women running workouts, intervals, if that feels okay, if it's something that they have been doing for quite a while. But is there any sort of, um, I guess, red flag around like the heart rate being too high for too many runs? Because I know we've kind of heard long time ago all about heart rate and not getting the heart rate up too high. Is there anything that you could kind of speak to that?
I think more so today, it is more like gauge, like again, kind of dialing into yourself and think like, how intense of a workout am I doing right now? So kind of moderate intensity is okay, but you really don't want to go into that like high level intensity, where you could barely like get a word out because you're working so hard. You still want to keep it in that like level where maybe you can have like that small conversation while you're working out. And if you're pushing beyond that, you want to slow down, kind of take a breath before you get back going. But there's not currently like a for everyone where it's like don't go above this number of heart rate because again it's so individual. It depends on like where your fitness is before, like your body. There's so many things that factor into that number. So it's not like a specific number that you have to avoid, more just the intensity. You don't want to hit that max intensity, especially in the later stages.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine that. That just feels very uncomfortable. I mean, it feels uncomfortable anyways.
Right. And I feel like
Like,
it would be like for most women, you're like naturally going to not go there because it is
yeah.
uncomfortable. You're like, I don't like that.
Yeah. 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 It's like the pain cave on the track, isn't the place I like to go. Now I couldn't imagine, while also maybe in my third trimester. But you never know. So it's good to know that. Um, and maybe we have the answer already to this question, but how do women make the decision to stop running altogether during pregnancy? What's kind of like that feeling, that run where it's like, okay, it's time to maybe today's the last day?
Yeah, I think it is just kind of that sense of like for me, I know when I was still trying, it's like it got to a point where I was like, man, like it's just too hard to try to like get up to do the run, like to get to that running portion. I'm gonna stick with walking. You know, it started to be a lot of pressure. You are getting tireder faster because, like I said, you're kind of getting compression on your lungs, so you can't expand and take those big deep breaths. So it'll be different for every woman, but like it shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I guess I gotta run. Like it's not worth it. It's okay to walk. Like that's still a very healthy way to stay active, or you could switch and do something else. Get out the yoga mat. Um, but there's no magic like thing that you could say to any given woman and be like, "Yep, that's how you know this one thing happened, so you're done."
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's jump to you had the baby. Congratulations. It's so exciting.
Yay!
They are so cute. And the woman is like recovering from pregnancy, which takes time, right? It's like coming back from
Yeah.
an injury. But what's kind of like the best practice or general guidelines around return to running? Like how long is like the suggested break time? How long should they expect to maybe be in this return to running phase? Can you kind of give more color around that?
Yeah. So for sure, now is not the time to rush right back into things, right? Like you just grew a baby, you had a baby, that's a lot on your body. You're going through a
Mhm.
lot of changes. And then you're also going to be really tired taking care of that baby afterwards on top of so take it super slow, be very gentle with yourself. And usually it's recommended to start more. Again, we're going back to the core again. Like start with just real simple those breathing exercises. Start engaging that core a little bit. And it can be real short in the beginning. Forget, people worried about 60, 90 minutes. Like start with 5 minutes, real gentle, simple, and then like short little walks. See how that's feeling. You're gonna walk real slow. I remember myself like shuffling down the sidewalk in those first couple of weeks because it feels good to get moving. It's good for your body, but go slow. Um, and then usually, I'd say for a lot of women, somewhere between like 10 to 12 weeks, you might feel like you could start like actual running. Prior to that, it's probably going to be more core and just like walking. You might start to speed up your walks there at the end, but I wouldn't really do anything more intense after that 12-week mark.
Yeah, and like maybe a run walk
Yeah.
training plan or a week or two based on how you're feeling is a great way to transition from the walking to the running phase.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the run walk is a great way to get back into your running and kind of build up that stamina again and that strength, and to do it in a way that hopefully you won't injure yourself. Because then you take a step way back if you have an injury right away.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, because this is kind of like you're coming back from almost like you have to treat it like you are coming back from an injury. And anytime an athlete is coming back from an injury, it is this very slow build. It's a very conservative build. It's
Hmm.
usually a run walk where it could be like 5 by 2 minutes running, 1 minute walking, or vice versa, 2 minutes walking, 1 minute running, right? And just slowly building that for the strength to come back and making sure that you're making these small movements forward versus trying to go too hard too fast and then taking a big leap backwards.
Yeah.
Can you kind of speak to like what can happen if a woman decides to get out there and run too hard, too fast, or too long, too soon?
So I guess one thing is, in this postpartum phase, your hormones are still kind of all wacky. You're still settling. And in general, there's a hormone called relaxin that you still have flowing through your body. So you might find just like your gait, your posture, like that's going to feel a little different too because you're a little looser. So if you go out too hard, too fast, you might miss some of those kind of cues your body is sending to you and you go overboard and you could hurt yourself. Some women experience like stress fractures and things like that too. Um, and then, you just set yourself up, for, potentially falling and breaking something too because you're going too fast and you're kind of still recovering, figuring out your balance. Um, you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Yeah, so your balance might feel a little bit off. You have a higher risk of a stress fracture. I'm thinking about it like, gosh, if you go too hard too soon, you could almost just like dig yourself into a really big hole that
Hmm.
you don't want to have to climb out of.
Yeah. And like it's going
Yeah.
to take harder. You go too hard, and then your recovery from that kind of training session is going to take longer before you can, go again because you feel more sore. Um, and just like the mental, like again, there's also a lot of just mentally the changes that are happening to you after having a baby and recovering too. You don't want to add that to your plate. This should be part of something that you're enjoying, making you feel kind of good. So you don't want to add this stress by going out so hard. I think unfortunately in our society, there's a lot of talk about women bouncing back, right? Get right back to yourself. It's amazing. She did it so quickly. And we really shouldn't have that expectation on women. It took a year, almost a year to grow the baby. And then you had this really big experience, getting the baby out. Like, of course, you're not going to bounce back. It's going to take time and it should. And that's what we should expect of ourselves, not the other way around.
Yeah, it took 9 or 10 months to grow that child. It's going to take
Right?
time. It's not going to be this immediate you feel like yourself again. And I
Hmm.
coach a lot of females, but a lot of moms, and anytime they're coming back from they're in their postpartum journey and that comparison game starts, it's like, "Oh, we got to nip this, we got to stop this." It's like, "Let's just wipe the slate clean. You don't have any PRs. You get
Right.
to start fresh and new once we start kind of like those workouts and starting getting into racing again, which is, down the road, but it can be a really fun place to be of like, I don't have any PRs to have to like
Hmm.
make me nervous or anxious going into this race. I can just run strong and it's going to be such a cool celebration in so many different ways. Um, is return to running different if you have a natural birth versus having a C-section?
It can take a little longer potentially to get back to like that full like ability to run because healing and recovery from a C-section can take longer because it's harder on the body.
Mm.
It's an abdominal surgery. So it's not that the natural way is easy, but you can't. Women tend to recover a little faster from that than from a C-section. But even women who have C-sections can definitely still return and do it safely. You just might want to take a little extra time again with those early steps, working on making sure your core is sound and recovered. Before you get to that higher intensity level.
Absolutely. And again, it's all based on individual feels, the recovery process, how quickly that's going, all the strength training and everything that was done before getting pregnant. And then, of course, during that pregnancy phase, when is it safe to start adding in some intensity? And should it be like some light strides first, or is a light tempo okay? What's kind of like the general recommendation or best practices around that?
Yeah, okay. It's usually, probably around that like 3 month mark or so that a lot of women, if they've been kind of easing back, will start to feel like they can amp up the intensity a little bit. I usually say, yeah, start light, do a couple of those workouts, see how it feels, and build from there. And it's all just, it's building, see how you do. If it's not feeling right, you got to kind of go back to where you were, do a couple more sessions at that level before trying again.
Yeah, and would like extra breathing exercises, extra strength training kind of help
For sure, you want
in
to
this
include,
situation?
yeah, continue all your strength training, and then making sure, and recovery too, making sure you are like taking the time to just stretch. And I know for me, stretching before, like as I started to get more intense, remembering to do the before and the after was really important for me and making sure I stayed healthy. And then, of course, with the fueling and the hydration, that's really important, in as part of the recovery, and especially if you're breastfeeding, your fueling and hydration is really important.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So focusing on all those process goals, everyone, throughout all parts of life,
Yeah.
makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things we should naturally be doing, but it's especially important in this space.
For sure. Yeah. And it's really important because you want to feel good. I think we can all agree to that. Like, we just want to feel good. We want to feel like ourselves. It's also okay to not feel that way right away or have it take maybe longer if you've had more than one pregnancy and more than one postpartum journey. Because, like you mentioned, they're all different. Everyone is different. And every season is going to be different in this. I know I'm really good at ignoring things that are happening. I love to justify things by saying, like, oh, I feel this way because of X. I'm fine. And so some people might be like smiling, nodding, thinking right now to themselves, hey, that's me too. Hey, congratulations, we're in this together. But what are some signs that new moms can look for maybe in the first year to year and a half postpartum where they either like know that they are healing correctly? And on the flip side to that, what are some signs that maybe something is wrong and they're taking some steps back, but they don't want to necessarily acknowledge it or see it?
Yeah. So yeah, kind of things that you'd probably tell anyone, but signs that things are kind of going as they should is like you are gonna like gradually you're gonna be feeling stronger and stronger. Your stamina is gonna be building, day by day as you go through the process. You're like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing it the right way. But if you feel like you're like just not really being able to build, like you've been several weeks, you're like, man, I'm just still as tired as I was. Maybe you're doing too much. You might need to slow
Mm,
down, and that's why you're not really progressing. Obviously, pain, again, a little bit of discomfort. Sure, we can all feel time to time, but if you're having pain consistently when you're out there, something is not right. It could be your mechanics are off, like maybe, again, like we talked about, just your gait can change. Maybe you need different shoes now that you're postpartum. But like for me, I know like after my second, I was starting to have some like sharp pains in like my left hip that I, just like you, was like, nope, it's fine. This is, I'm going to ignore this. I don't have time to deal with this. I don't want to stop.
yeah.
I want to keep going. And so I probably waited longer than I should have, because doctors were not really good patients in general. So I tried to kind of keep pushing until it really did get to a point where I was like, I was having trouble like walking up the stairs because I was having this pain.
Oh,
I was like, this, I should have stopped much sooner trying to kind of get through it. And I also, it's fine now. It's luckily nothing serious. I went to PT. It kind of got sorted out. But use me as an example of what not to do. And you listen, like I was definitely having those pains earlier where I knew I should have stopped, and it probably would have allowed me to recover faster if I had listened to my body.
yeah. And that's so true for all of us if we're going through a niggle or an injury while training or while getting back to it, right? I think it's really normal to ignore it. I
Oh,
commend all the runners, especially like I see it as a coach, like the ones that will come to me right away. I'm like, thank you so much for saying something on day one versus day 14, because yeah, you can nip it in the bud and you can get back out there and feel totally great. And maybe it's taking 3 or 4 days off versus months off, which can be it's scary in both worlds to take a few days off or having to take months off. Do you recommend that new moms see like a PT postpartum? Is that something that you highly recommend? What are the benefits to that?
So I do think that pelvic floor PT should probably be given to
Mhm.
every woman after they have a baby. I don't think it's often recommended as like just routine. I think it usually takes women saying things are already, causing pain or they're having trouble in some way. Because I do
Mhm.
think that starting with them early can really help kind of rebuild, focus on kind of strengthening the right things and get you safely doing the right things for your body. So that is one thing I would say for sure. Um, and then some women too, like if you do happen to know somebody or work with a coach who has experience working with, postpartum moms, that's probably helpful too, just because one, they have the insight and the experience, and it kind of takes that mental load off of you. I know for me, when I was working with my coach that first time around, it was so nice to just not have to think about what I was going to do. She just kind of told me. And so I found out it was very easy from like a mental load to just follow somebody's advice. And she had had the experience, and she knew like what was going on. So I was doing it safely, following her advice.
Yeah. Christina, I think you're a rule follower. Is that correct?
A rule
Are you a rule?
follower? Oh
Yeah. Are
yeah,
you a rule follower? Yeah.
for sure.
Anytime I hear like, give me a plan and I'll follow it, which I fall into that category too. I'm like, oh, you follow the rules.
So
I
yeah,
like it. I
if
like
I
it.
have rules, if I can check a box too, give me a good list that I can check off some things. That's
I
where I'm at.
know. I know. I have a digital like planner to kind of help me with my week and running a coaching business, but I still gravitate towards to my like paper planner and
Yeah,
like checking things off, lining things out. It just feels so good.
it does.
Is there anything else that new moms should know that could be happening to their body, their mind, maybe their training that is considered totally normal when they are in the postpartum phase? And how long is the postpartum phase?
So you'll probably get a lot of definitions about that depending on who you talk to. A lot of I guess old school way of thinking is like, oh, 6 weeks, right? After your 6 week check, like you're
Oh,
done, which is crazy.
yeah.
But there's evidence that it takes like 2 years to recover from having a baby. So for me, that's really the postpartum phase. Um,
Yeah.
so it's quite extended. It takes some time for your body to fully recover. It's a major, thing that your body goes through. So yeah, those people who say like 6 to 8 weeks and like that's enough, like no, that's just like we're just barely hitting the surface there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking 18 months, so I like the
Hmm.
2 years. Like, let's just
Yeah.
be a bit more conservative here because it is a major thing that your body, your mind goes through that really does need time to heal, recover, repair, and build back to be stronger. Is there anything that you want to share on like things that will happen that are still considered totally normal that we didn't touch on for today?
So I guess some normal thing like some women like your shoe size might change during pregnancy and right after, so you might need new shoes. Um, I was going to comment on hair loss. I think I'm not sure if a lot of women know that, but you do want to expect you're going to
Yeah.
have that postpartum hair loss. And it's not because you're not eating right or you're working out too hard. Like it's just, it is a natural phase. It usually starts around about 2 months postpartum, peak around 4 months, but it can linger. Like for some women, they'll still have some of that extra shedding of hair, until like 8 or 9 months postpartum. So it can be lengthy. Um, and then just that from a mental standpoint, of course, we should all be prepared for some changes. Again, it's just a lot, of change happening. And then you have this new baby that doesn't come with instructions, and no baby is the same. So even if you had one before, it could feel like a totally different experience. So not only are you dealing with the changes of your own body and all the hormone fluctuations, just navigating all of that, it's a lot. So just kind of recognizing that, naming those feelings, owning it, and like it is okay. Like we'll get through it. You'll get through it. And recognizing too, sometimes it is more serious. You know, postpartum anxiety and depression are very real things.
Mm.
I don't think they're often discussed enough because unfortunately for a lot of women, I think they feel a lot of shame around having those feelings. And so it often goes unrecognized because we're not talking about our experiences. We're not being honest about these
Mm.
feelings. But it's suggested that maybe up to 20% of women to some extent, suffer from this. So if you are out there and you are feeling this way, one, know you're not alone. You are not crazy. You're not a bad mom because you feel this way. And please ask for help. And to those people around these moms, kind of monitor for those signs. If it does seem more serious, make sure, you're helping her get the help she needs. Because again, addressing it earlier on when you're first noticing it is going to help for overall a more successful kind of return.
Yeah, and like what would be considered asking for help? Would they reach out to their doctor? Would they reach out to like what would kind of be that process?
Yeah, of course. So for sure, I would recommend they reach out to their doctor. It could be their OB or their like family medicine, internal medicine doctor. As a pediatrician, I talk to a lot of moms, right? We see them frequently. You can bring it up to your pediatrician. We will try to help you get, to the right place from there. um, and try to, and hopefully you are in a support system where you feel safe, that there's somebody in like your circle too that you can kind of lean on and share with, as they help you navigate the different medical people you might meet.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I know it can be really scary. It can be, it could be one of those things that you brush off and think I'm okay. Um, but if it is something that you're feeling, to ask for help and you can feel better faster, hopefully. That's the
Yeah.
goal. Um, great. What are some practical tips that new moms can implement to stay consistent in their routine as new moms, getting back to their strength training, maybe getting back into a little bit of a training plan if they're working with a coach or if they are building their own? What's kind of like the high level tips that you would give?
Yeah, that can be for sure tricky, right? Because so much,
Mhm.
everything's changing so frequently, your schedule in those first several months after having a baby. But trying to set small goals is usually very helpful. Like even if the big goal is, you are training for that marathon. Well, you're not running the marathon tomorrow. So the goal isn't that marathon pace. Start slow. Like I'm gonna do my core workouts twice this week if that's where you're at, and then move up 3 times. Um, so start small so it's attainable, and then you can, if you're like me, you can check the box. And then, you start to expand your goals from there. Also, sometimes simple thing like set an alarm, like because time does just kind of get away from you in this phase. You feel like you're kind of
Mm.
not doing anything, but always doing something at the same time. So I found like setting phone alerts, an alarm like, oh, it's time to do my 10 minutes of my core. So you can try to set phone alerts to help you with that. And it just helps you stay more consistent so you just don't forget. And then ask, like you said, ask for help. Like let your support team know that these are your goals. This is what you're trying to do, to kind of stay healthy in this phase. Give them jobs, like I'm going to try to get my workout at this time. You're on baby duty. So that way you don't have, it takes away from that risk or that feeling and all of us like, oh, but now I can't because the baby needs this. So I missed my workout because of XYZ. Like try to take all those excuses away from you by getting your team involved and helping them be responsible for some things.
Yeah, and I think it's normal to have just a lot of distractions, right? And it's interesting when you said like the day can fly by and you feel like you're not doing anything but you're busy like all day, right? Like
Yeah.
I can totally see that. I have been a nanny for like years and took care of very small children, took care of a newborn. So like I can like see that for sure. I think it's important too that you kind of check in with yourself and maybe you're showing up in the running space differently than how you showed up before you got pregnant. And that's totally
Yeah.
fine. I think try not to put too much guilt on like, but I trained, X number of
Oh,
miles or X
yeah.
number of days. Like, really just give yourself a big, big, big dose of grace and do what maybe feels the best for you, which could look very, very different from 10 months ago,
Yeah.
a year ago. And that's okay. I think if that drive was there before, it could definitely return
Yeah.
later. It's just a matter of when. Um, because I notice when I'm coaching people and there's like an excuse as to why they didn't run, but it's like in my mind, the excuse, I'm like, oh wow, I have 10 solutions to that excuse. It's like, well, then they don't want to do it. So
Yeah.
if you find yourself just not wanting to do
That's
it,
okay.
maybe don't. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
maybe
that's okay
don't.
too. Yeah, you don't have to go out and like
Yeah,
train hard at all. Like
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And then,
I was chatting with an athlete this week who is injured, unfortunately. And we developed this cross training plan for her. It's really going to set her up for success when she comes back to running. And the conversation was interesting because when we were talking about the schedule, I said, oh, hey, like maybe it's instead of like the stress of every day, whether it's swimming or a stationary bike or some upper body strength work, what if we say at the end of the week, whether that's on a Saturday or a Sunday, because everyone's definition of the end of a training week is different, you just take a look to see, did I get 3 swim sessions in this week? Check. Did I get 2 upper body sessions in? Check. Did I get 2 stationary bike sessions in? Check. Great. You achieved everything you needed to do for this week. And it kind of took the pressure off of her of thinking like she needed to have this like very structured plan as
yeah,
she's like going through this injury. And you kind of touched on that with like the return to running with new moms. Like maybe it's at the end, like it's a Sunday night and you're looking back and it's like, did I get 3 runs or 3 run walks in this week? Did I get 5 core workouts in? Did I get my breathing exercises done 6 days out of the 7 weeks? Because we know 7 is like
seven's a lot. Yeah,
not realistic, right? Or maybe 6 is too much too. But like I think that's a cool way to look at
that's
it
a
too,
great
because
way.
it does give this sense of accomplishment in a very chaotic, uncontrollable situation, right? Because the
Mhm.
baby's changing daily, basically.
Yeah,
You're changing daily. There's new things that you're learning about yourself. There's new things that you're learning about your child and how your family is working too as a unit. So I kind of love that for
yeah,
that situation and if you're coming back from an injury too.
yeah. I think that's great. Like you said, it's not so much the like miles or the pace or the number of minutes. It's just like, did I go outside today? Did I do my
Mhm.
stretching? It
Yeah.
allows you to be more flexible. You
Yeah, which is really the name of the game in this stage of
know,
the journey. Yeah.
absolutely.
Flexibility is key. So we all see those moms out there crushing it by pushing a stroller with their child or children in the stroller.
Yeah,
Half the time I'm like, "Ooh, I would not wanna be doing that." And the other half of the time I'm like, "I wish I could do that because it looks like such a good workout." And then when you take that stroller away and you place that runner in maybe a workout or a race later, like, I can just imagine how much stronger they are. But how should a new mom look at pushing a stroller during her training runs? Should she be running on effort? Should she be running on pace? And when does that start? Because it doesn't start immediately. You don't start with the newborn in a stroller. What's kind of the
exactly.
recommended guideline around the age of the child and kind of that space?
So from the baby standpoint, you're right. Like infants should not be in a jogging stroller, on day two of life. That's not safe. Um, so usually to be like running with like mom is running and I'm in the stroller, you want to have good head control. You're starting to get more body control because, of course, they're harnessed in, but you don't want the head just like flopping as you jog. So, this is usually around 6 months, for like the average developing child, where I would say that the kid is safe actually running with you in the stroller. Around 4 months is when they can actually like sit in the stroller and you can do like a gentle walking pace for most babies. If you want to have a kiddo on a walk with you while they're in a stroller prior to that, it really should be the ones that are like they're flat, so the baby is lying flat, almost like a bassinet on wheels, or the ones that are converted like with the car seats. And obviously, if you're at that stage, like you and baby shouldn't be doing any intensity running yet, and the baby shouldn't be out for too long anyway at that time. But once we get over kind of that 6 month mark, if you're at that and you're running and you want to take baby with you, definitely invest in a jogging stroller. I have definitely seen some moms trying to struggle with like a regular one. You're just going to end up, it's super frustrating. You might end up hurting yourself. It's just invest in the jogging stroller if you want to be out there jogging with your kiddo. It just makes a world of difference. I love my jogging stroller actually. And then when
Yeah.
you use it, the handlebar should be adjustable. So you do want to play around with that. Make sure it feels like it's a good position for you, where you're not leaning too far forward, just to hold on to it or to like up. And while you're running, make sure you're not leaning into that handlebar. You want to be mindful of like your posture, so that you're not leaning too far forward either.
Yeah, and the running should be on effort, I would
Yeah, I would say
think,
usually
right?
run by effort because, of course,
Yeah.
you shouldn't expect to run the same pace that you do when you're not. I mean, the stroller itself probably weighs 25 pounds. And then you add a kid, and of course, as the kids get bigger, they get heavier.
Mhm.
So you are going to slow down because you are pushing this thing. So
Yeah.
run by effort, and it's a great workout. You are getting stronger, and you'll notice the difference. Like if you do a run with that baby, and then like the next day you happen to be just by yourself, you're gonna feel amazing.
Yes, keep sight at the light at the end of the tunnel. Now,
Yeah,
it might be
it's
fabulous to run with your child, but I have to imagine like that break from the stroller pushing is
yeah,
remarkable too.
yeah. And usually I don't recommend going on the super long runs with the baby, just
Yeah.
because they really shouldn't be kind of in there for extended periods of time. So if you're going out like more than an hour for sure, like I probably wouldn't take your kid with you. Or if it's
Yeah.
be mindful too of like temperatures, if it's super hot outside, again, children can overheat easier than we can, especially in this infant stage. So just be mindful of that.
Mm, that's really interesting. Yeah, and maybe it's a situation where if you do have a long run and you're working with someone to help you, you can take the stroller out for in the child for like 45 minutes, cruise back home, and then go out on
Yep.
your own to finish your run and kind of making it a win-win that way.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any jogging stroller brands that you recommend that you really like?
So I guess the only one I've had personal experience with is mine. We have one of the Thule urban glides. It just works so wonderfully with the first one. We had no reason to try to find a new one afterwards. I know there are a couple of brands people will use, but that's mine, and I can say it's been great. It turns really easily. Um, the kids seem to like it in there, so I like that one.
That's incredible. Great. Is there anything that you want to talk about today that we didn't get to cover?
I thought I might touch a little bit more on breastfeeding, just because
Yeah.
that is something I personally did experience, and I know it's like another thing to consider. Um, and I know even for me when I was starting out, I had a couple people tell ask me like, "Are you sure you want to run? You're just gonna ruin your breastfeeding. It's gonna taint your supply." So there's a lot of like
Oh.
negativity out there, I think, too, that some moms might
Oh.
face, which is not based on truth. So it is safe to run and breastfeed. You might have to, pay attention, like I said, to certain things, but like by no means should you not run if you want to, simply because you're breastfeeding. There are ways to do it. Things to remember are like timing of feeding. It's usually more uncomfortable to try to run if it's like time for a feed when you're full. So I usually recommend either feeding the baby or pumping, because again, depending on the timing and your schedule, it might not be time to feed, but you could do like a quick pump section and then go for run. So just that is like an additional step, I guess, you're going to have to think about when you're planning your runs. And then definitely you're hungry all the time when you're breastfeeding. So if you're breastfeeding and running, it's like off the charts. So be prepared, and it's okay. Eat the food. This is not the time to be restricted. Like your body does need the calories. So again, we don't want to just eat junk. A little bit is probably okay, but you do want to eat a variety of food and not be scared of like having calories. And then hydration is super important. You are going to need extra water. And it's before, during, and after, like all the time, you're going to need a little extra water um, to help support, your milk production as well. And then a good sports bra, because you're going to be bigger than you were before you were pregnant, or I mean,
Yeah.
before you had the baby. So you're probably going to need a bigger size, and you really want like a really good supportive one. And you might need that type of support a little longer if you're breastfeeding than if you kind of don't breastfeed because of the milk. So
Yeah,
yeah,
those are all great tips. Do you have like a recommended number of ounces of water new moms should be drinking per day?
it's not necessarily like a number of ounces. Again, it's kind of small
Mhm.
sips throughout the day and making sure you're
Okay.
paying attention. Like you don't really want to get to that point where you're feeling super thirsty. Um,
Yeah.
I found for me a good way or a good time to make sure I was getting some extra hydration was actually while feeding the baby. So like baby's having a drink, you have somebody bring you a drink, and always carry, your water bottle and everything with you. Um,
I love that.
mm,
When the baby has a drink, mom has a drink. I
exactly.
love that.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I love that. And
it,
hey, it can extend to a nap too. When the baby's napping, mom naps.
hey, sometimes it happens. I can't move. The baby is sleeping. I just can't move.
Yeah.
Yeah. You use that. Yeah. Definitely make use of that excuse for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a win-win all around. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I know there's always, probably a long list of things to do when they are napping, but gosh, it's like such a great feeling when they are just sleeping in your arms and you're like, well, I'm in this rocking chair. It's fine.
Mhm.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Christina. It was really great to learn more about pregnancy and running while pregnant, as well as that postpartum return to running. I really appreciate you and your time today. If our audience is looking to reach out to you, where can they find you on social media? And do you have a website? Kind of any information that you want to provide is great.
Yeah, so I do have my own clinical practice here in New Jersey where I live. The name of the practice is Mama Doc MJ. And my Instagram with the practice, which you can reach me on, is at Mama Doc MJ. And then the website, you guessed it, www.mamadocmj. So you can reach me through any of those things. And I'd be happy to answer if anyone has any other questions, or if they just want to tag me and share their own personal journey with the postpartum, return to activity experience. I'd love to hear it, because I think it's important that all of us moms talk about it more, talk about our experiences.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, like sharing more helps normalize all the things going on, and you feel seen and heard in that way, which always feels good. Thank you again so much for your time today. And thanks everyone for listening. I'll see you next week.